Some parts of this story may not be suitable for younger viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. You're still watching without subscribing. Don't miss the next story. Subscribe now, share this with your friends, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Have you ever seen something in the sky or in the dark that no one believed? This is one of those stories, and it begins in the coldest, most hostile place on Earth. The year was 1947. Most of us thought we had left the horrors of war behind. We had marched through Europe, watched cities reduced to rubble, and seen men vanish in fire and smoke. We thought we had seen the worst the world could offer. But none of that prepared us for Antarctica. They called it Operation Highjump, the largest Antarctic expedition in history. Nearly 5,000 men, 13 ships, aircraft carriers, planes, submarines, scientists, and soldiers, all converging on the coldest, most hostile place on Earth. Officially, the mission was for research and training in polar conditions, but every man in uniform knew better. You don't send battleships and bombers to map snow. From the very start, something about the orders felt different. Officers avoided questions. Rumors spread fast. Some said we were there to secure territory before the Soviets. Others whispered about Nazi bases hidden under the ice. The war had ended only 2 years earlier, and many still believed that remnants of Hitler's empire had fled south. Others laughed, saying it was just politics, just training, but deep down, we all knew there was something more, something unspoken. The first thing that struck me wasn't the mission. It was the silence. Antarctica's silence isn't like anywhere else. In Europe, even in ruins, there had been sound boots on cobblestone, distant gunfire, voices shouting across rubble. But here, there was nothing. No birds, no trees, no wind through leaves, just a frozen void that pressed against your ears until you almost wished for noise, even if it was the sound of a rifle. Then came the cold, not just the kind that makes your breath sting or your fingers numb. This cold was alive. It crept under your clothes, settled into your bones, and sat there like an unwelcome guest. It didn't matter how many layers you wore out there, skin turned pale, lips cracked, and even the strongest men began to shake. The ice stretched out endlessly, glittering under the weak sun like broken glass. It was beautiful, yes, but it was also wrong. Too vast, too empty. It felt like we weren't walking on Earth anymore, but somewhere else entirely, another planet. And as the days passed, I began to notice how the men avoided looking too long at the horizon. It was as if staring into that endless white was like staring into madness. We were told to set up a base, Little America 4, tents, supply depots, communication lines, all carved out of the snow. We built, we drilled, we worked, but even then, things didn't feel right. Radios crackled with strange interference, not static, not the usual garbled signals. These were patterns, 3 short pulses, then 1 long, over and over. Some men said it was just equipment glitching in the extreme cold, but I knew better. So did the others. None of us said it out loud, but we felt it. The sound was coming from the ice itself. At night, the silence grew heavier. You'd lie in your sleeping bag, listening, waiting, and just when you thought you could sleep, you'd hear it. A vibration. Faint, subtle, like a hum under the frozen ground. Some men thought it was engines from our ships carrying through the ice, but I'd spent enough nights in the trenches of Europe to know the difference between machinery and something alive. The first week claimed its victims quickly. Frostbite, exhaustion, madness. One man wandered into the snow without a coat, mumbling that he had to answer the call. He was found hours later, frozen solid, eyes wide open, lips cracked into a grimace that wasn't quite fear, wasn't quite peace. After that, guards were posted at night, not to watch for enemies, but to watch our own men. That was when the laughter stopped. No more jokes about polar bears or snow demons. We spoke in whispers and we worked in silence. Something was waiting for us out there. We could feel it pressing against the edges of our minds, testing, probing, and yet, command pushed us further inland. Orders came to expand reconnaissance, to map deeper territories, to investigate strange readings. None of us knew what those readings were, but the way the officers looked at each other told us everything we needed to know. They were scared too. They weren't explorers. They weren't scientists. They were hunters, chasing something. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the ice in blood-red light, I stood on the ridge above our camp and stared out into the distance. For a moment, I thought I saw it, a shape, a spire, black against the white horizon. It was gone the moment I blinked, swallowed by snow and shadow. But I know what I saw. That night, the hum beneath the ice grew louder. 3 short pulses, 1 long. It wasn't random. It wasn't interference. It was communication. The ice wasn't empty. It was speaking. And God help us, we had already answered by coming here. The silence of Antarctica was unlike anything the soldiers had ever known. In Europe, silence meant danger. The quiet before a sniper's shot or the hush after artillery fire. But here, silence was endless. It wasn't peace, it was crushing. As if the ice itself wanted to bury their voices, swallow their thoughts, erase their presence. The men of Operation Highjump set up camp along the jagged ice shelf, hammering poles into frozen ground that cracked like brittle glass. Their breath poured into the air like ghosts, vanishing instantly. Every tent, every radio post, every makeshift runway was surrounded by miles of nothing. White plains stretched so far that the horizon looked painted. But emptiness didn't mean safety. From the very first night, unease crawled through the ranks. Radios hissed and snapped with strange interference. Compass needles spun for no reason. Even the aircraft mechanics, hardened men who had worked in blizzards across the world, muttered that the cold here felt different. It wasn't just freezing flesh. It was pressing into bone, into the mind like a weight. One of the junior officers, Lieutenant Carver, wrote in his notebook, "The men are unsettled. They hear things at night, whistles in the wind, pops in the ice. Sometimes I hear them too." At first, everyone blamed the weather. Antarctica was supposed to be alien, unpredictable, but the noises weren't just wind. Men swore they heard boots crunching on snow outside their tents. Others said they woke to shadows moving across the canvas, tall, angular, too big to be human. Chief Petty Officer Miles, a veteran of the Pacific War, dismissed it all. "Just nerves," he grumbled. "Ghost stories for the greenhorns." But even he grew pale when one morning they found a trail of footprints near camp, bare footprints. No boots, no shoes, bare human feet pressed deep into the snow, walking straight toward the camp and then vanishing. "Impossible," the commander said flatly. "No man survives barefoot in this cold." But the tracks were there. The men saw them. They knew. Supplies began to disappear. Nothing big at first, a crate of rations, a fuel canister, a box of tools. Everyone accused each other until one night, a sentry swore he saw someone dragging equipment across the ice. He raised his rifle, shouted, but the figure melted into the fog before he could fire. The next morning, they found the crate half buried in snow, torn open, not looted neatly, torn apart, as if by claws. Whispers grew. The men spoke in low voices about things living beneath the ice. Some said it was Germans, survivors of Hitler's rumored Antarctic base. Others muttered about ancient things, older than mankind, things that the cold had preserved for centuries. One night, Sergeant Hollis burst into the Commander Sip's tent, his face white as bone. "Sir, the ice moved," he stammered. "I saw it, like it was breathing." The commander tried to laugh it off, but Hollis wasn't lying, and soon more men swore they felt it too. Standing on the frozen plain, they'd feel a pulse, a slow vibration, as if something massive stirred deep beneath the glacier. It wasn't just the ground, the sky played tricks as well. Aurora lights shimmered above the camp, twisting into unnatural shapes. The green glow stretched and curved until it looked like faces staring down. Eyes unblinking, jaws open in silent screams. Some men prayed. Others refused to look up at night at all. Then came the first disappearance. Private Larson, only 19, failed to report for duty. His bunk was empty. His boots were gone. Search parties fanned out across the ice, their lanterns glowing weakly in the fog. Hours passed. Nothing. Just snow, ice, silence. But in the morning, they found his helmet at the edge of a crevasse, not fallen in, not lying by accident. placed set neatly on the ice, as if someone wanted them to find it. The men stared into the crevasse, a black maw in the earth, stretching endlessly down, no bottom, just darkness. Some swore they heard something moving in the depths, scraping, clawing, breathing. The commander ordered the search called off. He sits gone. Nothing more we can do. But the men didn't sleep that night. They couldn't, because from the crevasse came a sound, faint, echoing, almost too low to hear. It was Larsen Sepp's voice, calling for help. Please, please. Men gripped their rifles and covered their ears. Some screamed at the sound. Others swore it wasn't Larsen at all. It was something else, something using his voice. After that, nobody went near the crevasses again. By the second week, morale was shattered. Men spoke openly of mutiny, of abandoning the mission, but they couldn't leave. Planes malfunctioned, engines refused to start. Every attempt to break camp and move deeper inland was thwarted by storms that rolled in out of nowhere, pinning them down, forcing them to stay. It was as if the continent itself wouldn't let them go. One night, the aurora burned brighter than ever. The entire sky turned blood red, casting the snowfields in a sickly glow. Soldiers watched in silence as shadows moved across the ice. Hundreds of them, long-limbed and jerking, like marionettes. No footprints, no bodies, just shadows. And then, from the distance, came the sound that would haunt the survivors forever. Not wind, not ice cracking. A howl. Low, endless. Not animal, not human, something in between. The men froze. No one breathed. Miles, the hardened veteran, whispered what everyone was thinking. We stir not alone out here. The howl faded into the red glow of the aurora, leaving the camp shivering in silence. No one spoke. No one dared. The men just stood there, rifles clutched tight, waiting for the sound to come again. But it didn't. The night grew still, too still. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. When dawn broke, the commander ordered everyone back to duty. We're soldiers, not children, he barked, trying to rally them. But the men's eyes were hollow. No one laughed at his words. No one saluted with conviction. They only obeyed because they had no choice. By midday, another storm rolled in, smothering the camp in white. Snow whipped sideways across the ice, stinging like knives. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Patrols huddled close to their lanterns, their voices muffled under layers of scarves. That's Sepp's when Private Daniels went missing. He'd been tethered to the rope line, standard procedure in storms. But when the wind cleared for a moment, his section leaders saw the rope dangling loose. Daniels was gone. The snow was too heavy for footprints, but there was no sign of a struggle, no dropped rifle, no cry for help, just gone. Lost his footing, the commander muttered, though his voice lacked conviction, but the men knew. Daniels hadn't fallen. He'd been taken. When the storm finally passed, the search began. Lanterns swung through the white haze as squads swept the camp's perimeter. They found nothing for hours, until one man shouted. There, half a mile from camp, sat Daniel's rifle, propped neatly against an ice boulder. Beside it, carved into the snow with unnatural precision, was a symbol, a circle crossed with jagged lines, glowing faintly in the twilight. The men stared at it, uneasy. None dared touch it. The glow wasn't fire, wasn't light reflecting. It came from the ice itself, like something burned beneath. We're leaving it, the commander ordered. No one touches that. Back to camp. But the men couldn't unsee it, couldn't forget it. That night, Daniel's screams echoed from somewhere in the white void, long, drawn-out cries of agony, carried on the wind, circling the camp like wolves. Some men covered their ears and wept. Others fired blindly into the storm, bullets vanishing into the dark. The commander tried to keep order, but even he was shaking. It's tricks. Just tricks. But no trick explained what came next. 3 nights later, another storm hit. But this time, something moved inside it. At first it was shapes, barely visible in the swirling snow. Tall figures, too thin, too sharp, their limbs bending wrong, as if the cold had sculpted men from ice and broken them halfway. They circled the camp just beyond the lantern light. Sentries shouted, rifles fired. The bullets seemed to pass through, punching snow but drawing no blood. The figures didn't flinch. They only watched. Then one stepped closer. Private Hollis swore it was Daniels. Same uniform, same face, but pale, hollow, eyes black as tar. His mouth hung open and a sound poured out, not a voice, but the howl they'd heard before, ripping through the storm like glass on metal. Hold fire, the commander yelled. Don't set. Too late. Hollis fired. The bullet punched through Daniel's chest, but instead of falling, his body broke apart, not into flesh, but into a cloud of snow and ice shards carried off on the wind. The other figures howled in unison. Chaos erupted. Men ran between tents, firing at shadows, screaming at things they couldn't hit. Lanterns toppled, spilling fire across the snow, but the flames guttered in seconds under the storm. Radios screeched with static, then went dead. Through it all, the commander shouted orders no one heard. The camp had dissolved into madness. Then something massive struck. From the ice beneath the camp came a tremor, then a crack. The ground split with a deafening roar, tents collapsed. Crates fell into yawning fissures that glowed faintly from below, like molten light hidden deep in the glacier. The men scrambled, clutching whatever they could before the ice swallowed it whole. Private Carver slipped, sliding toward the fissure. Two men grabbed him, hauling him back, but a hand, black and clawed, shot from the crack, gripping his leg. He screamed as the thing dragged him down. The others pulled, veins bursting, but the ice swallowed him in a spray of snow. His scream cut off in an instant. The men froze. No one moved. No one breathed. The fissure sealed shut, perfectly, as if it had never been there. Silence returned, broken only by the ragged gasps of soldiers who had just watched the impossible. "We stir leaving," Miles whispered, his voice trembling. "We can stay here. This place doesn't want us." But where could they go? Every direction was the same. Endless white, endless silence. The commander, pale and shaking, looked around at the broken camp. His men were broken too, half mad, haunted. Still, he forced the words out. "We hold, we don't run. We the United States Navy. We finish the mission." No one believed him, not anymore. That night, no one slept. They sat in their tents, rifles in hand, eyes wide, waiting for the next storm, the next howl, the next attack from the white void that surrounded them. They didn't have to wait long, because as dawn broke, one by one men began to vanish again. No storm this time, no attack. They were just gone. 1 second, they were sitting in their tents. The next, only empty blankets remained. And the footprints leading out of camp were always the same, bare human, and heading toward the fissures in the ice. The camp had turned into a graveyard of silence. No one laughed anymore. No one traded stories of home. Every conversation was a whisper. Every glance over the shoulder carried a question: who's next? The commander ordered double patrols, as if men with rifles could stop what they were facing. But the rifles didn't matter. Bullets didn't matter. Nothing mattered in this frozen place that obeyed no human laws. Then came the discovery. A recon team, 4 men led by Sergeant Miles, ventured farther out than anyone dared. They followed the bare footprints, those impossible trails leading away from the vanished soldiers. For hours they trudged across the ice, through a silence so deep it made their ears ring. At last, the footprints ended. Not in snow, not in a body, but at the edge of something unnatural, a cave yawning black in the side of a glacier. The entrance was too perfect, too clean, as if carved not by wind or water but by hands. Strange symbols were etched into the ice around it, the same jagged circle they had seen before, glowing faintly under the weak sun. The men hesitated. Miles raised his lantern, its light barely piercing the dark. "Orders are to report back," one of the privates whispered. But Miles didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the symbols. "They are pulling us here," he muttered. "This is where it all comes from." Against better judgment, they entered. The ice walls swallowed the light almost instantly. gleaming like glass. The deeper they went, the more the cave felt alive. The air hummed, faint vibrations pulsing through their boots, as if something enormous stirred beneath. Then they saw it. Bones. Not human, not animal. Piled in heaps along the walls, half frozen into the ice. Skulls with jaws too long, rib cages too wide, spines twisted into unnatural shapes. The men stopped, staring. "What the hell lives down here?" one whispered. No one answered. As they moved deeper, they reached a chamber, and in its center stood something no one could explain. A black stone pillar, impossibly smooth, rising out of the ice, as if it had always been there. Symbols covered its surface, glowing with the same faint light they had seen in the snow. The men circled it slowly, weapons raised, as if rifles could matter against this thing. The air was warmer here, almost humid. Their breath no longer smoked in front of them. Miles reached out. "Don, destit," one of the privates hissed. "God, Don destit, touch it." But Miles' sept hand brushed the stone. The pillar pulsed. Once, twice, then the cavern shook. The ice above groaned, cracks spiderwebbing across the ceiling. The bones along the walls rattled as if stirred awake, and from the pillar itself came a sound. A deep, resonant hum that sank into the men's chests, vibrating their hearts. The private screamed and fired his rifle at the stone. Bullets sparked uselessly off its surface. Then the hum shifted into something worse. Whispers, thousands of voices, overlapping, speaking in no language the men knew, but each syllable drilled into their skulls like nails. One man dropped his rifle, clutching his ears until blood ran between his fingers. Another began to laugh, a high, broken sound, his mind already gone. Miles dragged them back, forcing them toward the entrance. The whispers grew louder, the cavern itself alive with sound. The ice walls shuddered, and in the cracks between bones, something began to move. Shapes. Tall, thin, wrong, just like the figures from the storm. The men ran, lantern light swung wildly as boots pounded the ice. Behind them, shadows followed, gliding more than walking, their movements jagged and inhuman. They burst from the cave into the blinding white of daylight, collapsing into the snow. The whispers cut off instantly, leaving only the hollow roar of the wind. Two men lay shaking, their eyes wide, mouths open in silent screams. They didn't move when Miles shook them. They didn't blink. They were alive. But whatever spark made them human was gone. The survivors dragged them back to camp. The commander demanded answers, but Miles could barely speak. All he said was one line, voice hoarse with fear. "There's something buried under this ice, and it doesn't want us here." The men who had gone into the cave never recovered. They sat in silence, staring at nothing, lips muttering fragments of words no one understood. At night, they screamed in unison, their voices blending into a perfect, unnatural harmony. The commander tried to call it hysteria, tried to maintain order, but even he avoided their gaze now. He knew, everyone knew. They weren't set alone. The mission had turned from exploration into survival, and each night, as the auroras burned blood red above them, the soldiers waited for the storm to bring the figures back. But they didn't need to wait for long, because the next storm would not bring shadows. It would bring the thing that commanded them. The storm came without warning. One moment, the skies above the camp were clear, the auroras flickering faintly against the horizon. The next, the wind howled like a dying animal, tearing through tents, ripping flags from their poles. Men scrambled to secure the equipment, shouting over the roar. Snow whipped across their vision, turning the world into a wall of shifting white. It wasn't just a storm. The veterans among them had seen blizzards before. But this was different. The air was alive with a static hum, the same vibration they had felt in the cave, the same tone that had made bones rattle and whispers crawl through their skulls. The commander ordered everyone inside the main structure, a reinforced shelter carved into the ice, but the men hesitated. Some stared into the storm, eyes wide, swearing they saw shapes moving between the gusts. Not men, not animals, something else. The first scream shattered the order. It came from the watchtower. A single guard, silhouetted against the swirling white, raised his rifle and fired blindly into the storm. His muzzle flash lit the snow for a split second, and in that instant, they saw it. A figure, tall, wrong. Its limbs bent at angles no human body could endure. Its head jerked unnaturally as it moved, like a puppet with invisible strings. The guard's shots tore into it, but it didn't fall. Instead, it twisted, not to avoid the bullets, but to absorb them, its body folding like liquid around the impacts. Then it leapt. The tower collapsed in seconds. The guard's scream was cut short. The camp erupted into chaos. Men fired into the storm, tracer rounds slicing through the blizzard, but each flash revealed more shapes, dozens of them, circling, closing in. The snow seemed to bend around them, like the world itself rejected their presence. Inside the shelter, the survivors from the cave began chanting. Their voices, once broken, now rose in unison. The same guttural words they had whispered in their sleep now rolled like thunder through the cramped walls. "They set calling it," one soldier gasped. "They set calling it here." The commander drew his pistol, his hands shaking as he pointed it toward the chanting men. But before he could act, the ground itself shook. It wasn't the storm. It was something beneath. The ice groaned, deep and resonant, like a continent sighing. Cracks split the floor, racing outward in jagged lines. Lanterns swung, smashing against the walls. Men fell to their knees as the chamber trembled. Then, silence. The chanting stopped. The storm outside ceased, as if cut off with a blade. And in that unnatural quiet, something rose. The ice at the center of the camp split apart, a massive fissure tearing open. A stench wafted up, not of decay but of age, of something sealed away for millennia. The air grew hot, steaming against the cold. From the fissure, a shape began to emerge. At first it seemed like a column of black stone, like the pillar in the cave, but then it moved. Limbs unfolded, segments shifted. A head, or what passed for one, turned toward the soldiers. It wasn't a creature in any human sense. Its body was a lattice of bone and ice, tendrils of sinew connecting impossible angles. Its eyes, if they were eyes, glowed faintly red, like embers buried in ash. It towered over the camp, blotting out what little light filtered through the storm. Men opened fire. Bullets shattered against its form, some ricocheting back into the ranks. Flamethrowers roared, spewing fire across the fissure. For a moment the thing seemed to recoil. The men cheered until the fire bent backward, sucked into the fissure as though consumed. The creature's sep's head tilted. Then came the sound. Not a roar, not a scream, but the same whispers from the pillar, amplified 1,000-fold, a chorus of voices, pressing into every skull, every nerve, forcing men to their knees. Some soldiers turned their weapons on themselves. Others began firing at their comrades, their eyes glazed, faces slack. The commander shouted for order, but his voice was lost in the storm of madness. The survivors from the cave stood and walked into the fissure, their faces calm, almost blissful, as if stepping into the arms of something they had long awaited. One of them turned back before vanishing into the dark, his lips curling into a smile. "You shouldn't have come here," he said softly. The fissure closed behind him, sealing with a sound like breaking glass. And the creature, it vanished. As quickly as it had appeared, the thing dissolved into the storm, leaving only silence and blood. When the wind cleared, the camp was ruined. Half the men were gone. The watchtower was a splintered ruin. Equipment lay scattered across the snow, glowing faintly with the same unnatural symbols. The commander staggered through the wreckage, pistol limp in his hand, his eyes hollow. "This isn't a mission anymore," he whispered. "This is a burial ground." But deep beneath the ice, in the fissure that had sealed shut, something had awakened, and it was only a matter of time before it rose again. The camp was silent now, but it wasn't peace. It was the silence of a graveyard, the kind that pressed down on the chest and made every breath feel borrowed. Snow crunched under boots as the survivors stumbled through the wreckage. The once busy outpost was a ruin. Tents shredded, towers collapsed, equipment scattered like bones in a predator's den, blood trails cut across the snow, already half buried by the relentless drift. No one spoke. They didn't have to. The truth weighed heavy in every soldier's eyes, half their number gone. The fissure sealed, taking the chanting men with it. The creature vanished, but its presence lingered, gnawing at the edges of thought. The whispers hadn't stopped. They were softer now, like a lullaby hum just beyond hearing. But they were there, always there. The commander gathered the survivors. Barely 20 men left. His face was pale, drawn, his voice hoarse as he gave the order. "We sir leaving, now we head for the coast. We call for extraction. We don't stop, we don't stop, we don't stop, look back." The men nodded, some eagerly, others too broken to argue. Leaving was the only hope left. They packed what they could, rifles, rations, maps. The radios had gone dead hours ago, emitting only static that occasionally bent into faint voices none dared to decipher. Still, they carried them, clinging to the hope of contact. By nightfall, they were marching into the white void. The Antarctic wilderness was merciless. The wind howled across the barren expanse, erasing their tracks within seconds. The moon hung low, distorted by the swirling ice, casting long shadows that moved when the men didn't. One soldier swore he saw a figure pacing alongside the group, always at the edge of vision, tall, twisted, watching. "Just the storm playing tricks," another muttered. But his voice wavered. Hours passed. The men grew weary, their bodies heavy, their thoughts sluggish. Some whispered that the land itself was bending against them, stretching the distance between them and the coast. Every step felt like sinking into sand. By dawn, one soldier was missing. His bedroll lay undisturbed, his rifle propped neatly against his pack. No tracks led away. It was as though he had simply dissolved into the ice. The commander said nothing. They moved on. On the third day, they reached the frozen ridges overlooking the sea. Relief surged through the group. They could see the coastline, jagged and desolate, but real. If they followed it, they could find their ships. Then came the sound. At first it was faint, like a low hum beneath the wind, but it grew, swelling into a vibration that rattled their teeth. The same sound from the fissure, the same cursed frequency that had haunted them since the pillar. The ice beneath their boots began to crack, not from their weight, but from something rising below. "Run!" the commander shouted. The men scrambled down the ridge, snow and ice collapsing behind them. Dark fissures tore across the land, racing toward the sea. From within them, red light pulsed, faint then blinding, like the heartbeat of something alive. One man slipped, the ice opened beneath him, swallowing him whole. His scream echoed until it was cut off, replaced by a wet, bone-shaking crunch. The survivors didn't stop. They couldn't set. By nightfall, they reached the coast. Their relief was short-lived. The ships were gone. Where their vessels had once been anchored, there was only broken ice and empty sea. No wreckage, no bodies. As though the ocean itself had consumed them. Panic spread through the group. Some cursed, some fell to their knees, sobbing. Others stared blankly at the horizon, where the sun dipped low but never seemed to rise again. They were trapped. That night, the whispers grew louder. The men tried to rest in shifts, but sleep brought no relief. Dreams bled into reality. They saw the pillar in their minds, the chanting men, the towering creature with ember eyes, and always they heard the same phrase, in voices both alien and familiar. "You are part of us now." One soldier awoke screaming, clawing at his face as though trying to peel off a mask. Another fired into the darkness, claiming he saw the twisted figures from the storm surrounding them. When the group checked, there was nothing, but his bullets had torn through two of their own. The commander snapped. He pulled his pistol, forcing the group to stand in a circle. "We're not losing ourselves," he hissed. "We're not letting it take us." His hands shook as he pressed the barrel to his temple. A soldier tackled him before he could fire, wrenching the gun away. But in the scuffle, the radio tumbled from his pack. It switched on. Static filled the night. Then through the crackle, a voice. At first, it sounded like salvation, a U.S. accent, clipped and calm. This is base. Copy. Hold position. We sir coming for you." The men cheered, relief breaking through the despair, but as the voice continued, the words warped, the tone deepened. By the end, it was no longer human. "We see her already here." The radio burst into flame, the plastic melting in seconds. Silence fell again, and then the shadows moved. Figures emerged from the snow, just as they had on the night of the storm. Tall, broken silhouettes, their heads twisted at impossible angles, their limbs bent like shattered marionettes. The soldiers opened fire, but deep down, they knew the truth. They weren't set escaping. Not tonight, not ever. The coast of Antarctica had become their prison, their tomb. The gunfire lit up the coast like a storm of lightning, muzzle flashes streaking against the endless night. But every bullet vanished into the snowstorm, swallowed whole before it found its mark. The shapes kept coming, tall, crooked shadows that looked like men but moved like puppets on invisible strings. The survivors fell back, stumbling over ice and jagged stone. Rifles jammed in the freezing air. Magazines fumbled by hands trembling with more than cold. Every man fired until the clicks of empty chambers echoed louder than the storm. And still, the shadows advanced. One soldier screamed and charged forward with his bayonet, only for the figure before him to melt away into smoke. In an instant, it was behind him, its elongated arm piercing clean through his chest. The man's scream cut short as his body froze midair, ice creeping outward from the wound, encasing him in a crystalline coffin before shattering him into shards. The rest broke and ran. The commander led the retreat along the jagged coast. His voice was hoarse, breaking as he barked, orders no one listened to anymore. The men scattered like frightened children, slipping across black ice that stretched endlessly into the sea. Everywhere, the whispers followed. Not from the storm, not from the shadows, but from inside. Voices in their skulls, calling them by name, urging them to stop fighting and let go. "You steer already home," the whispers crooned. One man dropped his rifle and fell to his knees, weeping. He spread his arms wide, as though greeting an old friend. In the whiteout, something vast and dark enfolded him. He didn't scream. The others pressed on. By dawn, if it could be called dawn in a place where the sun never rose, only 6 men remained. They huddled in the ruins of an old supply depot, the walls half buried in snow, the roof creaking with the weight of centuries of ice. The commander slumped against a wall, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow. He no longer spoke of rescue. He no longer spoke at all. The men lit a small fire from what wood they could scavenge, but the flames gave no warmth. Shadows danced across the walls, and in those shifting shapes they saw faces, familiar, impossibly so. Dead comrades, wives, children, smiling, beckoning. One soldier broke. He stumbled into the firelight, staring into the dancing shapes. "My boy," he whispered, tears freezing on his cheeks. "He sits here." Before anyone could stop him, he walked straight into the flames. His body did not burn. The fire folded around him like water, and he was gone. The fire went out. On the second night, the storm returned. Not wind, not snow, but something alive. The very air vibrated like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The ice walls of the depot cracked, red light bleeding through the fractures. The commander stirred for the first time in hours. He raised his head, and in the glow of the fissures his eyes gleamed, ember red. The grave was never frozen, he rasped, his voice no longer his own. It breathes. The ground split beneath them. The survivors were dragged into the abyss. Some clawed at the ice, their nails snapping off as the fissure widened. Others fired into the void, bullets clattering uselessly against walls that pulsed like living flesh. The air stank of iron and ash, of things older than mankind. As they fell, they saw it again. The pillar, rising from the depths, etched with symbols that burned against their retinas. At its base, the creature, vast, skeletal, its spine arching like a cathedral roof. Its head turned, ember eyes locking on each man as if counting them, claiming them. They realized then the truth. Operation Highjump had not been about exploration, not about war. It had been about containment, The US had come here not to conquer, but to make sure nothing ever came out. And now the mission had failed. The last soldier, no one remembered his name anymore, landed hard on an ice shelf far below. His legs shattered, bone tearing through flesh. Pain was fleeting. The cold numbed him within seconds. He lay there, staring upward. The fissure above was sealing, snow cascading inward like a curtain closing on a stage. For a moment, he thought he saw the sky, stars glittering faintly in the Antarctic night. Then the shadows blotted them out. The last thing he heard was not the storm, nor the whispers, but a voice inside his own skull, calm, inevitable. The frozen grave is open, and you are its witness. The ice sealed, the coast was silent once more. Decades later, declassified files would tell a different story. Operation Highjump ended due to logistical difficulties and harsh weather conditions. Survivors were few, their testimonies redacted, their words twisted into mundane reports. But whispers still lingered in sailor bars, and among pilots who flew too close to Antarctica, whispers of lights beneath the ice. Whispers of radio static carrying voices of the dead. Whispers of a grave that was never meant to be disturbed. The truth of Antarctica's frozen grave was buried, just like the men who vanished into it. And maybe it should stay that way.